There's a strange type of person in the modern world. Someone who dreams big, talks big, imagines an extraordinary future, but struggles to take action. They want success, they want freedom, they want greatness. Yet somehow, they delay, they procrastinate, they wait for tomorrow. People call them lazy. But what if laziness is only part of the story? What if behind that lack of action is a mind filled with pressure, fear, perfectionism, emotional exhaustion, and hidden ambition? This is the psychology of people who are lazy, but ambitious. And the truth might change how you see yourself forever. Never in human history have people been exposed to so many dreams. Every day, millions wake up and immediately see wealth, fame, luxury, success, perfect bodies, perfect lifestyles. Social media constantly whispers, you could become more. And for many people, that message becomes addictive. They start imagining a better future, starting a business, becoming rich, changing the world, escaping ordinary life. But imagination alone doesn't create progress. And this is where the conflict begins. Because ambition creates pressure, and pressure can either create movement or paralysis. Some people become obsessed with action. Others become trapped inside thought. They think about success so much that they mistake imagination for progress. Their brain rewards fantasies almost like real achievements. And slowly, they become addicted to potential instead of execution. Most people misunderstand laziness. They think lazy people simply don't care. But psychology tells a different story. In many cases, laziness is not the absence of desire. It's the absence of emotional energy. A person may deeply want success while simultaneously feeling mentally overwhelmed. This creates cognitive dissonance, a painful psychological state where your goals and your actions do not match. The ambitious, lazy person often lives inside constant guilt. They wake up already disappointed in themselves. They compare themselves to others. They feel behind in life. And over time, their brain starts associating work with emotional pain. So instead of acting, they escape into entertainment, scrolling, gaming, daydreaming, sleeping, anything that temporarily removes discomfort. The outside world sees laziness, but internally, the person may be fighting a silent emotional war. One of the biggest hidden causes of lazy ambition is fear. Not fear of failure alone, but fear of discovering the truth about oneself. Because as long as a dream remains untested, it stays perfect. A future millionaire, a future artist, a future creator, a future genius. Potential feels safe. Action is dangerous because action creates evidence, and evidence can hurt the ego. Imagine spending years believing you're meant for greatness, only to try and fail. For some people, that possibility becomes terrifying. So the brain creates avoidance. Procrastination becomes emotional protection. The person delays not because they lack ambition, but because ambition matters too much. Failure would feel personal. So they stay in preparation mode forever. Research mode, planning mode, thinking mode, never fully committing. Because unfinished dreams can still pretend to be successful. Another hidden truth: many lazy, ambitious people are actually perfectionists. They don't avoid work because they hate effort. They avoid work because their standards are impossibly high. They imagine success in cinematic detail, perfect outcomes, perfect timing, perfect execution. And when reality doesn't match fantasy, motivation collapses. Psychologists call this perfection paralysis. The mind becomes trapped between the desire to create and the fear of creating something imperfect. So instead of producing bad work, they produce nothing. Ironically, their ambition becomes the very thing destroying their progress, because perfectionism creates emotional exhaustion. And exhaustion often looks like laziness from the outside. The modern world is engineered to destroy focus. Every app competes for attention. Every notification promises stimulation. And the human brain loves dopamine. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical. But in reality, it is deeply connected to motivation and anticipation. The problem is this: modern entertainment delivers instant rewards. Real success does not. Building a business takes years. Learning skills takes effort. Mastery requires repetition. But social media gives instant emotional stimulation in seconds. Over time, the brain adapts. Simple tasks begin to feel unbearably slow. Reading becomes difficult. Deep work becomes painful. Discipline feels exhausting. The ambitious, lazy person often suffers from overstimulation. Their brain has become addicted to easy rewards, while still dreaming of difficult achievements. This creates an internal contradiction: massive goals, with a nervous system trained for instant gratification. There is another psychological trap that ambitious, lazy people rarely notice: the fantasy identity. Sometimes people fall in love with the image of being successful, more than the process required to become successful. They love the idea of being admired, being rich, being respected, being extraordinary. But they avoid the uncomfortable daily reality: repetition, discipline, failure, boredom, consistency. Real achievement is often monotonous. The human brain prefers emotional excitement. So many people unconsciously replace action with imagination. They consume motivation constantly. But motivation without execution becomes entertainment. And eventually, they mistake inspiration for transformation. For some people, the roots of ambition and laziness begin in childhood. Children raised with excessive criticism often develop fear-based motivation. They learn mistakes equal shame. Over time, this creates avoidance behavior, because avoiding tasks feels emotionally safer than risking failure. Other children grow up praised for intelligence instead of effort. They become attached to appearing talented. So when challenges appear, they avoid situations where they might struggle. Psychologists call this a fixed mindset, and it can quietly destroy ambition, because true growth requires repeated imperfection. The ambitious, lazy adult may still carry these hidden psychological patterns decades later. Without realizing it, their procrastination may actually be self-protection learned in childhood. Few emotions are heavier than untapped potential. Deep inside, ambitious, lazy people often believe they could become something extraordinary. And that belief becomes both inspiration and torture. Because every wasted day feels like self-betrayal. Every delay increases guilt, and guilt drains even more energy. Eventually, many enter a destructive cycle. Dream big, avoid action, feel guilty, escape discomfort, lose confidence, repeat. Years can disappear this way, not because the person lacks intelligence, not because they lack dreams, but because they never learned how to manage their own psychology. Interestingly, many highly successful people once considered themselves lazy. So what changed? usually. Their environment, identity, or emotional pain reached a breaking point. Human beings change dramatically when pain becomes unbearable, meaning becomes clear, or survival feels threatened. Sometimes a breakup changes someone, sometimes failure, sometimes financial pressure, sometimes humiliation. A powerful emotional experience can reorganize behavior overnight. But sustainable transformation usually comes from identity change. The person stops saying, "I need motivation," and starts saying, "This is who I am now." Because long-term discipline is rarely built on emotion, it is built on identity. The ambitious, lazy mind often thinks too big. It imagines massive transformation instantly. But psychology shows that small, consistent actions are far more powerful. Tiny actions reduce resistance. 1 page, 5 minutes, 1 workout, 1 video, 1 step. Small wins create momentum. Momentum creates confidence, and confidence creates action. The brain begins rewiring itself through repetition. This is called neuroplasticity. Every repeated behavior strengthens neural pathways, meaning discipline is not something people are born with. It is something they build slowly, repeatedly, daily. Most ambitious, lazy people are waiting for motivation. But motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with emotion. The people who succeed consistently are not always motivated. They simply act before negotiating with their feelings. This is one of the greatest psychological differences between dreamers and achievers. Dreamers rely on emotion. Achievers rely on systems. When behavior becomes routine, less mental energy is required. And eventually, discipline starts feeling natural. Not because the work became easier, but because resistance became weaker. To escape the trap of ambitious laziness, people must rebuild their relationship with discomfort. Because growth always feels uncomfortable at first. The goal is not to eliminate resistance. The goal is to act despite resistance. This often requires better sleep, less overstimulation, clear goals, structured routines, exercise, self-awareness, and emotional honesty. Most importantly, people must stop building their identity around potential. Potential means nothing without action. The world rewards execution, not imagination alone. Inside millions of people lives a strange contradiction, a lazy body, with an ambitious mind, a person who dreams of greatness, while battling avoidance every single day. But laziness is not always weakness. Sometimes it is fear, sometimes exhaustion, sometimes overstimulation, sometimes perfectionism, sometimes years of hidden emotional conditioning. The tragedy is not failing to become extraordinary. The tragedy is never trying long enough to discover what you could have become, because ambition without action becomes regret. But ambition combined with consistent effort can completely transform a human life. The future is shaped less by intense motivation and more by repeated daily behavior. One action, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. And perhaps the most important realization of all, the person you admire most may simply be someone who learned how to act, even when they didn't feel like it. Maybe you are not lazy. Maybe you are overwhelmed, distracted, afraid, or trapped between fantasy and action. But no matter how long you've delayed your future, the next decision still belongs to you. And sometimes, the smallest action changes an entire life.